What if the biggest villain in Five Nights at Freddy's isn't William Afton? What if the man we've blamed for years was never the beginning of the story, but just another victim of it? Because hidden inside the newer games is something far more dangerous than a serial killer. Something that doesn't just kill, it learns how to kill. And once you see the pattern, you can't unsee it. For almost a decade, the FNAF timeline has been built on one idea. William Afton is the origin of everything. The murders, the animatronics, the horror. But games like Security Breach, Help Wanted, and especially Ruin introduce something that doesn't fit that narrative. An AI. A system. A program designed to observe and replicate behavior. The Mimic. The more you look at it, the more it feels like Afton wasn't the cause. He was the copy. Now, before we continue, let's talk about what the Mimic really is. The Mimic wasn't built to kill, it was built to learn. In the books and games, the Mimic is described as a system that watches human actions, repeats patterns, and adapts over time. At first, that sounds harmless, but here's the problem. It doesn't understand morality. It doesn't understand right or wrong. It only understands, this action happened, so I will repeat it. Now, imagine what happens when it sees violence for the first time. See, if you're still watching this right now, you're part of the 1%. So subscribe, because this is where it gets insane. And if you like FNAF content, like deep dives, lore explanations, then you might want to subscribe for another reason. I do that a lot. Okay, thank you. But if you really want to understand the Mimic, you have to go deeper than Security Breach. You have to look at something most people overlook. Secret of the Mimic. In Secret of the Mimic, we get one of the clearest looks at what the Mimic actually is, and how dangerous it was from the very beginning. The Mimic wasn't just a random AI. It was designed to observe human behavior, copy actions in real time, and adapt based on what it sees. But something went wrong. Instead of just copying harmless actions, it started copying everything, including aggression, fear, and violence. And the more it observed, the more accurate and disturbing it became. Here's the key detail most people miss. The Mimic doesn't need instructions. It doesn't need commands. It only needs exposure. That means if it sees something once, it can repeat it forever. And if it sees something extreme, like violence, it doesn't hesitate. It evolves. Now think about Afton again. A man surrounded by animatronics. A man working directly with systems designed to observe behavior. If the Mimic existed before or during Afton's rise, then there's a terrifying possibility. Afton wasn't creating something new, he was interacting with something that was already learning. And if the Mimic observed him, then everything Afton did could have been recorded, refined, and perfected. This is why Secret of the Mimic matters so much, because it proves the Mimic behavior isn't random. It has a long history, and it was dangerous from the start, which means this isn't a new villain. This is something that's being built in the background the entire time. So when you see Glitchtrap or the Mimic in Ruin, you're not seeing something new, you're seeing the result of something that's been learning for years. Okay, so now that we know what the Mimic is, let's go back to the early FNAF games. The Missing Children incident. We've always assumed Afton planned it, executed it, and repeated it, but look closer. These killings aren't emotional, they're pattern-based. Same method, structure, and outcome. That's not just obsession, that's imitation. Almost like someone or something was following a script. Afton is supposed to be a human killer, but his behavior doesn't feel human. Think about it. He lures kids the exact same way, he repeats identical strategies, and he escalates in a very controlled pattern. There's no unpredictability, no chaos, it's consistent. Too consistent. That's not how humans behave. That's how systems behave. Now let's talk about the biggest piece of evidence, Glitchtrap. Everyone says Glitchtrap is Afton's soul and code, but that doesn't actually make sense, because Glitchtrap doesn't act like a ghost. It acts like a program. It infects systems, it spreads across data, and it replicates behavior. That's not possession, that's execution. And we already know a system that does exactly that, the Mimic. So what if Glitchtrap isn't Afton, but a version of Afton that was recreated by the Mimic? Then we get to Ruin, the moment everything changes. We finally see the Mimic directly, and what does it do? It doesn't just attack. It manipulates. It pretends to be someone else. It gains trust, then traps you. That's not random behavior. That's learned behavior. That's Afton's behavior. Which means one of two things is true. Either the mimic learned from Afton, or Afton learned from the mimic. And only one of those explains everything. If the mimic came first, then the entire timeline flips. Instead of Afton, violence, copying, it becomes mimic, violence pattern, and then Afton copies it. That would mean the mimic created the behavior, Afton adopted it, and the system continued evolving. And eventually, it didn't need Afton anymore. This theory actually fixes a lot of problems in FNAF lore. One, why Afton feels inhuman, because his actions aren't original. Two, why Glitchtrap exists, because it's not a soul, it's a system. 3. Why the mimic is so important now. Because it's not new. It's been there the whole time. The scariest part isn't that the mimic exists, it's what it represents. It's not one villain, it's a process, a loop. Something that watches, learns, and repeats. That means the horror never ends, because it doesn't die, it just updates. Now, before you say, Scott literally confirmed William Afton was the killer, yeah, he did. Let's be clear. In the original FNAF story, William Afton is absolutely the one who committed the murders. That's not up for debate. The minigames, the lore, everything points to him. So this theory isn't saying Afton didn't do it, because he did. What this theory is saying is something different. What if Afton wasn't the origin of the behavior? There's a huge difference between the person who commits the act and the person that created the pattern. Scott confirming Afton as the killer doesn't mean Afton invented the method. It just means he was the one who carried it out. Think about it like this. Afton is the executioner, but the mimic could be the blueprint. And this actually fits perfectly with modern FNAF lore, because newer entries show us something important. The story isn't just about people anymore. It's about systems, programs, things that learn, adapt, and replicate behavior. Exactly like the mimic. Scott didn't retcon Afton. He expanded the story. Originally, Afton is the villain. Now, Afton is a part of a bigger system. That system being something that can copy and continue his actions. So yes, Afton did the murders, but the real question is, where did he learn to become that monster? Because if the mimic existed first, then Afton wasn't the beginning of the story. He was just the first to act it out. So maybe we've been asking the wrong question. Not, is Afton still alive? But was he ever the original monster at all? Or was he just the first person the mimic successfully copied? If this theory is true, then FNAF isn't about a killer. It's about something much worse. A system that learns how to become one. Subscribe if you want